Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. This is Haider Mehdi, and this is the voice of Free Pakistan. Today is our weekly English program on current affairs in Pakistan and the globe. And I have the great privilege and honor to welcome Murtaza Hussain of DropSite News. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Murtaza, welcome to the program.
Welcome, salam. Thank you, Heather.
And I also have the great pleasure of welcoming a young Shaan Mehdi, who is going to be anchoring this program for Murtaza and myself. Welcome to the program. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Shaan Mehdi.
Thank you. Welcome, Islam. Pleasure to have you.
Thank you very much. Shaan, take it from here.
Thank you. So, Murtaza, really appreciate you being here. Your writings in DropSite News, the news scoops, the stories that you uncover are incredible. A lot of people especially in the overseas Pakistan community, rely on you and Ryan Grimm to provide them with the news of what's happening and insights into U.S. foreign policy towards Pakistan. So along that vein, just wanted to talk about a couple of developments that have taken place today or in the past couple of days. Firstly, President Donald Trump has had a conversation with President Putin. Seemingly, we're going to have that on the screen very shortly. And seemingly a very positive conversation between the two. Seems like Putin is amenable to having discussions with the U.S. on stopping the war in Ukraine, or at least he's amenable to listening to Trump's advice in Ukraine. So firstly, just wanted to get your thoughts on that. Why do you think that's happened now? Was Putin always kind of waiting for Trump to get into power before doing something like this? Was it kind of his plan? And here we have the tweet in front of us here. So the highlighted are kind of the zoomed in portions are just describing what are the main topics, the main themes that were kind of covered. But yeah, Murtaza, just wanted to hear your thoughts. Why do you think that this conversation happened now, and what impact will it have in Ukraine?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Shaan. So, no one really knew what his policy would be towards Ukraine and Russia or other issues, Europe generally, before he came to power. There were some contradictory hints of what approach he may take. But now we see very, very strong indications he's going to pull back from supporting the war in Ukraine. It's pretty much been directly stated by his new Secretary of Defense that they'd like to solve this issue, not just solve it diplomatically, but immediately. And an immediate, quick solution really favors the Russians because really the U.S. is signaling that's willing to give up its leverage vis-a-vis Ukraine. This issue is not that important to them. So, I think that it's interesting. I was in Ukraine last year, and you can see the society is very exhausted by the war, and there's a tremendous amount of destruction and loss of life. People have fled the country in huge numbers, women and children. Men can't leave because the borders are controlled, the conscription situation in the Ukrainian military. So I think that what's going to happen now is if we see a deal made, and as Pete Hegseth, the new Secretary of Defense, has said, the deal would not entail Ukraine joining NATO. It would not entail American security guarantees, most likely, for Ukraine. I think that when the war ends, a lot more people will leave Ukraine because they're afraid that the war will start again in a few years. That's the way they view it. It's just pauses that the Russians have taken in between restarting the conflict periodically. So I think that you'll see, not much reconstruction in Ukraine, a lot more emigration, and really the war will end in a way which is much more favorable to the Russians than it is to the Ukrainians. And that's just the inevitable outcome, it seems like, at the moment. Because Russia is making steady gains in the conflict, the U.S. has signaled it's done with funding the Ukrainian side of the war, and we're headed to a situation whereby Russia will effectively win a victory in Ukraine, albeit a very costly victory.
Can I just interject a quick one? So Murtaza, I understand that if this is happening, and because Imran Khan, one great charge against Imran Khan by the Biden administration was that he was partnering with Putin. He went to Russia when they attacked. Do you think this also signals some impact on towards Pakistan?
Maybe indirectly, because as you mentioned, there was this issue of his stance or his perceived neutral stance on the war in Ukraine, and the visit that he took to Moscow, which happened to be coincidentally timed at the time the war started. But that said, Pakistan is it's not primarily it's top of mind for the U.S. at the moment. As you know, the Indian Prime Minister Modi is coming to Washington. He's going to meet with Trump and so forth. They're really focused on building closer ties with India. That's a very primary focus of the Indo-Pacific strategy for the U.S. And they're not really thinking of Pakistan in the context of this per se. That said, there are certain people in the Trump administration who expressed sympathy for Imran Khan. I've talked to some of them before. They feel he was a victim of the U.S. quote-unquote deep state, which they also feel that they were victims of themselves. So they may do something to try to help Imran Khan on a personal level, but I don't think it will entail a lot of effort. Maybe some tweets from Trump, maybe some conditioning of some things, based assistance or communication with Pakistan based on some conciliation made about Imran Khan. But because they're so focused on India, and India has basically locked themselves in as America's primary partner in the region, I don't think they're going to devote a lot of energy to getting involved in Pakistani politics, unless something happens which forces them to, which I think is, it's questionable at the moment.
Thank you, Mirza. So in terms of U.S. foreign policy change, as my father just mentioned, so you think that they may have an indirect impact on Pakistan, but do you think that with the influx of politicians or Trump administration leaders such as Tulsi Gabbard, who has also just been confirmed very recently, do you think that will? I know people talk about U.S. tools of U.S. imperialism being weakened now by cutting funding to things such as USAID or NED. Do you think the confirmation of people like Tulsi Gabbard is a positive message for people in the global South, for governments in the global South who have an argument to say that there have been interference by the U.S. establishment in the past year? So do you think confirmation of people like Tulsi Gabbard is a positive development in that regard, or is this just going to promote U.S. establishment goals as they have in the past?
I don't think it would be necessarily positive for people in the global South per se. It may probably does signal that the U.S. is trying to pull back from some of its previous policies, more the liberal imperialist policies that they had before. But they could have other, like Tulsi Gabbard is very fanatically pro-Israel and pro-Modi and things like this. So depending where your stance is on those subjects, it could be very bad for people in the global South. So I don't see it as a positive step per se. I don't really understand. There's all this optimism about Tulsi Gabbard for certain reasons. She said certain things about Julian Assange or Edward Snowden or people like this in the past, but it's kind of just a rhetoric. I feel that I don't see it as drawing from any deeper, coherent ideological conviction per se. I think it's interesting that she was appointed to this role, and it's certainly going to have some sort of, it's a very powerful, influential role in the U.S. intelligence community. It's certainly antagonized a lot of people in the traditional establishment, but I'm not really sure what it's going to mean in practice. And I think there's reasons to be skeptical of it, to be honest.
So there's very strong evidence of Tulsi's very close ties with India, and you've just mentioned that Pakistan is not top of mind for Trump, and India is certainly in this region. So we shouldn't look too happily towards Tulsi Gabbard as being the standard bearer of restoration of democracy and regime change in Pakistan through military and ulterior means.
No, I think that she could be really hostile to Pakistan. I think it's because she's not just this establishment view of being pro-India. She, is a Hindutva type person. Like there's a fanatic hatred of Pakistan actually, and by Muslims generally, and Muslims in India, Muslims around the world. So having people like this increasingly represented in powerful roles in the U.S. is really a troubling development, depending on your perspective. And obviously, you also have this alliance between extreme right Zionist people and extreme right Hindutva people. Not conspiracy, it's really just reflective in the personnel at the moment. The more that coalesces, I think that you'll see the push for whatever policy is most disadvantageous to Pakistan, for instance, or most harmful to Pakistan. You see other people appointed in the administration in less high-profile roles, but still very important roles, where have a history of skepticism or hostility towards Pakistan, or are very favorable to India for different reasons. So that's not just Tulsi Gabbard, it's a lot of different roles. And I think that that's a very formidable and noteworthy developments that we're seeing now coalesce in the U.S. And you hope that Pakistan and other countries are doing what they can to insulate themselves or build their own ties with each other, such that they could constrain this, because I think that could be potentially a very troubling development for them in the years to come.
So dovetailing off that, you mentioned how Pakistan is not top of mind for US. It's not a priority if you're talking about US State Department, their to-do list. But if if you were a Pakistani leader and you recognize this, that Pakistan is not a priority for the US, and you were trying to change that, then would you be doing something akin to drawing the US back into a war in the region? And I'm talking about what the DropSite article that you had published, what that had revealed. So would you be able to talk a little bit about the DropSite article? What is the calculus of the Pakistani army? Why are they trying to involve the US back in the region? And how does that impact Pakistani army's relationships with Imran Khan and the PTI party?
Okay, yeah. So as you mentioned, DropSite published this article last week. It's about a plan which is currently under consideration by the Pakistani military to escalate military operations in Afghanistan, major military operations in Afghanistan, invasion, airstrikes, all these things, large-scale campaign, targeting, in theory, ISIS-K, Islamic State Khorasan province in Afghanistan. Obviously, this is the Central Asian branch of ISIS, and that's carried out terrorist attacks in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iran, Russia. It's a significant threat, you could say, to many countries. It's not really clear if it's a threat to the United States per se, but Pakistan, the Pakistani military, would really like the U.S. to continue giving it attention, treating it as important strategically, giving it counterterrorism aid and military aid and support. And right now, they have nothing really to do that because its interests on India are not aligned. The U.S. is pro-India. Its interests in China are not really aligned. Pakistan's on side with China more than the U.S. in many ways, so there's not anything to capitalize on there. But if theoretically they have this shared interest in fighting ISIS, so the more that the Pakistani military can characterize ISIS as a huge threat to the United States, and they can see them portray themselves as being the front line against ISIS in Afghanistan, that's a way they could draw the U.S. back in the region and maybe resume some of that cooperation which they enjoyed during the war on terror. So, obviously, it's a huge risk to go to war in a neighboring country. It's going to antagonize the Afghan government, and probably there'll be backlash in Pakistan against this as well, too. And yet, in the absence of other ideas of how to make Pakistan relevant to DC again, it's a plausible idea, really, and it's under consideration at the moment. And to your point about PTI, they need to have a war abroad. You need to have stability at home. And obviously, this conflict with PTI has been very destabilizing to Pakistan and the Pakistani military's ability to govern the country. So what they're trying to do now is to sort of break the PTI and so make it a pliable party, conciliatory party, the way the other parties are inside Pakistan. But the problem is Imran Khan is not really amenable to that. He's he's a very hard-headed character. You could say he's not willing to make a deal with the military or back down and things like that. That's why he's still in jail and he hasn't gone to exile or been released to house arrest. But they're trying to find other people inside the party. And then the article goes into this great detail. I won't go over the whole article itself, but basically they're trying to find other leaders in PTI who may be willing to take this -1 strategy. So we'll accept the PTI, but with no Imran Khan. And ultimately, the PTI has to do what we say in the military. He cannot challenge the idea that we're really in control. So that's what they're trying to do. And it's a plausible strategy, to be honest. It's kind of hard to see how much the PTI is willing, the popular supporters are willing to abandon Imran Khan, but certainly the leaders, some of them are under so much pressure that maybe they could be bullied into getting rid of him, and maybe even given incentives to do that. And we're seeing that strategy take place right now. It's a familiar strategy the military has used to divide the civilian opposition in the past.
So, what's a quick one on this? This was a major, huge scoop that you came out, and it seems that this is not just a pie in the sky plan. These are very serious efforts and plans being planned by the military establishment in Pakistan, led by Asim Munir, to drag Pakistan into a massive conflict with Afghanistan on the pretext of fighting terrorism, and with the hope of dragging Trump and the USA into this, which is unlikely to happen. So we may end up having a war on our hand, a conflict on our hand, which we started for a purpose which was not served, but is actually completely detrimental to Pakistan's sovereignty, interests, and security. Is that a correct assumption?
Yeah, I think it's a fair characterization in the sense that I don't think Pakistan really would benefit from having a major war in Afghanistan at the moment. Obviously, some counterterrorism, border security is essential, and there have been terrorist attacks inside Pakistan. But fighting a major war at the time the economy is so troubled and there's internal divisions and so forth, it's a huge gamble. But I think unfortunately the Pakistani military, this is how they're used to operating. They think very geostrategically, and they don't really know how to run an economy or how to fit into a globalized economy. They haven't figured out how to do that. So that's why personally I think it's very bad that the military controls the country, because they have no vision of how the modern economy should function. Other than that, some foreign country should fund Pakistan. Maybe the U.S. or the Gulf Arab states should give them money to be useful to them. That's really wasting the potential of Pakistan in many ways, I would say. But that's what they're going to try to do. They're trying to make Washington pay attention to them again by portraying themselves in this way. And who knows? Maybe there's been some ISIS attacks, and who knows what the story behind these attacks are. But they're very politically useful. You could say the Pakistani military in fostering this narrative. And but I'm not even sure this will work, because Donald Trump and Washington, they're not looking to get involved in Afghanistan again. They're looking to be finished with the subject. So it would take a lot to get them involved in the region again heavily. I think the most, some limited counterterrorism aid may come to Pakistan, but I don't foresee major resumption of war on terror scale support. And to be honest, the military wasted the support that it got. It didn't turn it into a sustainable sort of model that they could function on their own. As soon as the money stopped, they were back at zero again. So I think it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that there's so much military control and elite control of the economy. They haven't figured out a new model, and trying to get more money out of Washington is kind of it's not very inspiring, or it's not very sustainable way of
It's not a
operating.
very intelligent plan as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Sean.
Yeah, so I'll touch upon PTI in a little bit, but just to talk about the Pakistani military's strategies to countering terrorism on their borders. So, everyone talked about strategic depth back in the day to counter India, and how that's why they used to be supporting certain militant groups in Afghanistan. And, Afghan Taliban came out in 2020 as the last man standing, or the last group standing. So, some people say that the Pakistani military's policies at that time bore fruit. But now, if you're looking at the DropSite article and looking at the security situation around the country today, and as well as in the regional context, then one can make the argument that it has backfired. So, in your take, how do you see the Pakistani military moving forward in countering not only now the TTP, but also the Afghan Taliban on their western border?
That's a good question. I don't know, because obviously if they invade Afghanistan, it's going to increase their tensions, which already exist with the Afghan Taliban. I think that unfortunately it's very hard for Pakistan to have a good relationship with Afghanistan, regardless who's in power. It seems like they had bad relations with the previous government. They have pretty bad relations with the new government. I think just strategically and you could say geographically, it's just a very difficult relationship to manage. Seems structurally difficult, and obviously the instability in Afghanistan does not help that. I think that the best thing to do, well, actually, I don't know, because really this is the problem. The previous Afghan government had territorial ambitions to conquer, or they viewed parts of Pakistan as justly being parts of Afghanistan, and the new government seems to think that too, and they don't recognize the border. They don't recognize the Duran line, so to speak. So you can mine the border, but that would also impose really great hardships on people who live in Pakistan. And you also would like to try to have a healthy relationship and trade and so forth with your neighbors. So that's also not really a great solution. I think that unfortunately it's been very terrible for Afghans, but the solution that the Pakistani military and government has settled upon is that, well, if Afghanistan is going to be hostile and there's a government which has irredentist ambitions towards that territory, it's better they're weak. It's better they're weak government, an isolated government that is not really effective at galvanizing opposition to us. Even if it has relations with India, it's not able to capitalize upon those relationships because we've kept it dysfunctional. That's what they've settled upon. So that's why Afghanistan is in this way. So, I think that they're going to have this conflict with the Afghan Taliban probably in the future, escalated conflict. But maybe probably they have calculated that better to fight the Afghan Taliban, which is weak and isolated, than an Afghan government, Republic of Afghanistan, which maybe is backed by the West or is much more integrated in the global economy, more powerful and capable militarily. So they've settled upon that. So, it's not a very happy story, but that just seems where they've decided.
Thanks, thanks, Murtaza. So, just a quick comment, and I would like to move forward to another subject, which is that a conflict-prone or a adversarial filter vis-a-vis Afghanistan has not worked in the past, will not work in the future. A security paradigm versus Afghanistan is not going to work, and perhaps the approach that Imran Khan had adopted of reconciliation and talks is the only way forward to have a long-term sustainable relationship, certainly not the military sledgehammer. So thank you for that insight. So I'd like to move to perhaps the second last portion is Joe Wilson's tweet. Now, Joe Wilson, some people say he's a maverick, and some say he's serious. So he's written a letter to the army chief of Pakistan, Asim Munir. He's written a letter to Trump. And now he's tweeted earlier this morning again that, release Pakistan military regime must restore democracy. And he's also met a team from First Pakistan Global who met him, and they talked about the atrocities in Pakistan. This is led by Dr. Usman. So what do you make of Joe Wilson?
Well, it's interesting. He's not the only person in the U.S. establishment now who's saying this, and I think that this is an interesting development because this is largely a product of, I would think, the Pakistani diaspora in the United States lobbying and raising awareness about the subject, and I would say also the online, Pakistani e-citizenry, whatever you want to call it. They're always very vocal in sort of promoting this kind of thing and praising those politicians and Trump figures who say something about Imran Khan, and that actually has an effect, has a positive feedback cycle. So Joe Wilson says a lot of things. He says he's kind of doesn't talk about Pakistan. He talks about a lot of subjects, and he's sort of voluble about foreign affairs in a very unique way. I don't think he's necessarily a defining figure in the administration, but the more that he gets people on board with what he's saying, and the more the diaspora gets people like him from both parties to sort of raise this issue, the more likely there is of some development. And there could come a time when Pakistan really needs something from the U.S. the military, or vice versa, and maybe the fate of Imran Khan can be included in that in a way. And I think there is some kind of deal which could be made, but the question is whether it's a deal which results in Imran Khan being pressured to sell out some of his principles, which it seems like he's not going to. He could have left the country a long time ago. He could have been released a long time ago. He just doesn't want to compromise, and because he sees it as something moral issue personally. So I don't know. It's hard for me to say how much important this is, but I will say that he's not the only. Joe Wilson's not the only person in the administration who cares about the subject. There's Richard Grinnell and Darren Beatty and all these people. They have very strong feelings about Imran Khan in Pakistan, and now they're in power, and you could see some push on that score.
Yeah, I'd just like to add. I mean, we talk a lot about what Pakistan needs from the U.S., but I'm trying to think what can the Pakistani leadership, if they were astute, what could they do to present themselves, to package themselves as something that the U.S. needs? And I'm wondering, we're talking about why would the U.S. or why would Joe Wilson, why would Richard Grinnell care about Imran Khan or PTI supporters, for example? But could an argument be made that supporting Imran Khan or calling for his release would ingratiate the U.S. better in the populace, in the Pakistani populace, and kind of counter anti-American sentiment that has risen in the past couple of years. So would that not be, or is that something that you think the Trump administration is taking into calculation or taking into consideration, or do they not really care about soft power politics too heavily?
It's interesting. There's a couple of aspects to that. First of all, because of the fact that they don't need Pakistan at the moment, they don't necessarily need to have a really strong soft power approach to Pakistan, anyways, because they're not competing for economically for any favors inside Pakistan. Pakistan's asking them for money, actually, in terms of military aid and things like that. So there's less of an incentive, and I think that also the post 9/11, hearts and minds type of thing in the Muslim world, they've already moved past that. It's not really top of mind for them. It felt it didn't work anyways. And obviously, they did things which made people more angry. That didn't actually have any positive effect, whatever they did. So I think that they're not necessarily trying to prioritize that. And also, I think they like dealing with the military, to be honest, because the military, number of reasons. First of all, you don't have to deal with the whole population. You can just deal with one guy, Asim and some other officers. Probably were trained at Sandhurst or West Point, so there's a cultural familiarity with a lot of them. Not all of them, but many of them. And it's much simpler. It's much simpler than dealing with a big unruly country. And they're worried about the nuclear weapons and so the strategic things. If Pakistan were to have serious problems in the future, they would just have to keep things stable. If you notice, they never say we should have democracy. But the Biden administration never really said anything about democracy in Pakistan. They said stability in Pakistan. That's what they were saying that they wanted to have. And stability, dictators provide really good stability. So, there's that from an outsider's perspective. So, I don't think that they're going to try to compete that hard for favor inside Pakistan. But they could compete for the favor of the Pakistani diaspora in as much as it's organized and wealthy and influential and able to make its voice heard, especially in the United States. So I think that could actually be something, because in as much as Pakistan itself has not become, at least at the moment, is not extremely relevant to American politics, the diaspora is becoming more influential. It's becoming organized. It's becoming wealthier. So that could play a role, at least in having positive rhetoric towards Pakistan at minimum.
So, Murtaza, moving away from the rhetoric, but going to something substantive, which you just mentioned, it is stability in Pakistan. So the question is, will Trump see stability in Pakistan through the military, which was once loved by the people of Pakistan, now hated by the people of Pakistan? Or does he see stability in Pakistan under a leader like Imran Khan? That's the big question. What's your take on that?
Well, I think that if you look at the composition of the new administration, they've completely abandoned this idea of spreading democracy around the world. That post-Cold War idea is basically over. And one thing that connects Tulsi Gabbard and Pete Hegseth and J.D. Vance, all these people, is they're completely against that idea. They don't want to get involved in other people's problems. So as long as the military is able to keep things stable enough that they don't have to hear about any issues in Pakistan, then they're satisfied. That's good enough for them. And I think inevitably in the long term, democracy is better for stability. It's better for prosperity. Military rule is very rarely is it ever good, and it's not good in the case of Pakistan. But it's very messy democracy. It takes a long time. It's a lot of problems you have to sort out. It's not an easy situation. It's much harder dealing with Imran Khan than it is dealing with Asim in Washington, because Imran Khan's responses.
Provided Asim can keep the country stable. So my hypothesis is, if the Americans think, or Trump thinks, that Asim Munir will not be able to keep the country stable, even in the short term, do you think that would result in him actively advocating for Imran's release?
Well, it's hard for Imran Khan to prove he can keep it stable while he's in prison. If he was out and he was
No,
able
outside. If he's advocating for his release, and when he's outside or back in the saddle as prime minister, would he be a better option in keeping Pakistan stable versus Asim Munir continuing with his authoritarianism and fascism?
Well, maybe, but it's really hard to. It's kind of hard to prove that when you're not in power. It's possible,
Yeah.
and I think in the long term, yeah, absolutely. But usually, dictators are good at keeping things stable in the short term because they just arrest everybody or they kill everybody, and then things go quiet again, at least for a while, until they blow up again. Obviously, a democratic system is better for the simple reason that It gives people a non-violent solution, non-violent means of sorting out their differences with one another. Whereas if the dictatorship's in charge, then the only means you have of making your voice heard eventually winds up being violence, which is not a very stabilizing factor. So, I would think that a democracy in Pakistan in the long term is better for stability and better for the world in general. But, they're not thinking long term. They're thinking about next month. They're thinking about
Hmm.
now. So, maybe I think Asim probably could keep things stable for 6 months because he was just going to arrest anyone who says anything about him potentially. Or people protest, he could just kill them and they'd go home. That works pretty well in the short term. But maybe 10 years from now, Pakistan will completely melt down because no one can take that level of pressure. That's
Shaan,
the
last
argument
question.
we can make. But yeah, I don't know if the administration is thinking like that anymore.
Okay.
Yeah, not so much a question, just more of a point to add to Murtaza's point about the diaspora becoming a lot more important now. I think one thing that maybe we can see a change, an actual tangible change on ground, is that the people who used to have the ear of politicians in the West, let's say people who used to have access to the corridors of power in Washington, they would be from a very small segment of people in Pakistan. Usually PPP aligned. You could argue pretty pro-military from the elites of the Pakistani society. Generationally, they've been involved in pretty much leading the country. So those were the kind of people who would usually have access to policymakers or people with power in Western countries. However, now I feel, and Murtaza and Haider Saab, maybe you can counter this, that is changing. And the people who now are getting access are people from different backgrounds, people who weren't traditional power brokers in the country. So I'm. This is just I'm not sure if this is going to happen or not,
No,
but
this is a good
prediction.
point. You're really talking to Murtaza's point that
Right.
what we're seeing in America is a reflection of the power that the diaspora, which is now much widely spread, is imposing on the American system. But I'll let Murtaza address that.
No, I completely agree. I totally agree with that. That's democracy, actually, because you're seeing people organically emerge with their views. And the thing is, Imran Khan is just very popular among the Pakistani population and the diaspora as well too. He's probably the most popular person in Pakistan. So with this defunding of U.S. aid and stuff like that, the U.S. aid kind of funded its own astroturf civil society inside Pakistan, a pro-American civil society that was paid by Americans and was not able even to criticize American government or policies. So those people are going to get their funding sources cut off, and it could be replaced by simply the military talking to itself. But I think that because of the internet and because of the emergence of this class of affluent and politically engaged Pakistanis in Pakistan and abroad, you're going to see a diversity of voices which are more honest, which are voices which are more, you could say, reflective of the views of the Pakistani population, whether people in America prefer that or not. But I think that it's actually better because it's not good to fund people who just tell you what you want to hear, and then you wonder why you never make any progress in terms of your long-term strategic goals and so forth. You never hear honest feedback, and I think that Pakistan is a country where this is the worst. And I'm not saying anyone who received U.S. aid money is necessarily bad or had bad intentions. I don't think that's the case, but you're getting insincere, you're getting disingenuous information from people if they can't criticize you or if they can't give you an honest assessment. If you can't tell you things you don't want to hear, and I think that this fake US funded civil society in Pakistan, which is now losing its funding and being replaced by other people, that it was not a helpful phenomenon on balance, especially for the US.
Thank you, Murtaza. I was just showing Sherry Rahman, who got $500,000. We've got $15 million from NED, got $875 million from USAID. Of course, not all of it was spent on the wrong people, but the vast majority of it was certainly spent on the wrong people and the wrong organization. Like you said, Murtaza, we didn't get honest feedback on what's going on. Shaan, do you want to close up? And
Yeah, thank you so much, Murtaza. I really appreciate your insights. It's always a pleasure to hear what DropSite is doing, and to have you people on the ground in the middle of the battle, like actually in the war zone, doing the soldiers' work. So really appreciate that, and let us know how we can support you, how we can get more people involved in these conversations so we can come up to the table and think about solutions and the way forward.
Please, any listeners or viewers, please consider subscribing to DropSite. We have about 310,000 subscribers now and about 9,300 paid subscribers. We really need more support in that sense. Obviously DropSite was spun off from The Intercept, and there was a whole story about why that happened. But the reporting in Pakistan is all going to happen in DropSite now. And for generally speaking, we've had a lot of support on social media for DropSite from Pakistanis, but it hasn't really been reflected as much in the subscribers, especially paid subscribers, which you really need to keep going. So, please, for those who have the ability, subscribe or at least share with your friends to, let's see if they're interested, because the only way that we could continue doing this reporting is with support. We're independently funded by our readers. And I think we do a lot given what we have, much more so than the Washington Post and New York Times done about Pakistan. They've completely ignored Pakistan or just regurgitated the establishment's line, this whole place, on the whole subject. So please, for those who can do it, please consider, especially your Pakistani readers, because we have much more stories of Pakistan coming. But to continue the reporting, we need the resources to do it. So please take a look, and if you can, help us out, and then spread the word to others in the diaspora, which is becoming so influential now.
Certainly, Murtaza. It'll be an honor and a pleasure to support you. I do support you. My son supports you. We support DropSite. We contribute. We will continue to do that. We will tell everybody to do that because you're doing an amazing job. Shaan Mehdi, thank you very much for a wonderful part in anchoring this program. Murtaza, thank you very much for your brilliant insights as always. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you all. And may we see a socially just society wherever we live. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much, Murtaza. Thank you, Shaan.
Thank you.